Welcome to the Adventures of George Washington. I am your host, Professor Worthington. In this series, we will examine the life of the first President of the United States from his birth to his death. Each episode will highlight a pivotal event in Washington's life and analyze the impact these events had on his philosophy and subsequent actions. George Washington was born in a house that stood on the shores of the Potomac River in Westmoreland County, Virginia, on February 22nd in the year 1732. George was the first child of Augustine Washington and his second wife, Mary. However, he had two older brothers, Lawrence and Augustine Jr., from his father's first marriage. The Washingtons were a moderately wealthy family, owning several properties in Virginia which they farmed, but their home and possessions were not elaborate. By birth, Washington was a subject of the British Empire, which was ruled by King George II. At the time, there were 12 British colonies in America: Virginia, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maryland, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Delaware, North Carolina, South Carolina, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Within the next year, Georgia would become the 13th and last colony. On the day of George Washington's birth, a commentary on politics appeared in a Philadelphia newspaper called the American Weekly Mercury. The author, using the pseudonym Porteous, asserted that our emotions distort our political opinions so much that our passions quickly grow into rebellion against our political opponents and mutiny against our government. For Porteous, the only solution was to adopt a dispassionate attitude toward politics and government, because controlling our passions moderates our expectations, tames our emotions, and thus tempers our behavior. The ability to control one's emotions was especially important for the individuals running the government. In his words,
"If a government official is a fair, vigilant, and able counselor, no praises, no rewards can be sufficient for the pains he must necessarily be at, and the honest service he daily renders to his country, because he has so many strong temptations to act otherwise. But if he is corrupt, mercenary, avaricious, or ignorant in his business, there ought to be no mercy in his punishment. The greatest a people can inflict upon him is much too small for his crimes. His ignorance may be as destructive as his untrustworthiness, the latter in proportion to the trust his country puts in him. His guilt in doing evil is aggravated by the opportunity he has, and the obligation he is under for doing good."
While George Washington would have been obviously too young to have read this commentary, at least two themes from the article foreshadowed concepts that became important components of his belief system. First is the idea of a dispassionate approach to government. As you will see in forthcoming videos, his military and political leadership style was based on his unwavering commitment to duty, not in a desire for personal power. Additionally, in his farewell address to the nation, he warned future American citizens against the dangers of political partisanship and regional interests. The second theme is associated with the pseudonym Porteous. Porteous was a character in the play Cato, a Tragedy, written by Joseph Addison in the year 1712. This play, inspired by the life of Cato the Younger, a Roman politician who opposed Julius Caesar, not only highlights the consequences of political intrigue, but also delves into the philosophy of Stoicism and the sorrows of forbidden love. In upcoming videos, you will discover how these concepts had a significant influence in Washington's life. While George was still a baby, the family moved from Westmoreland County to their estate on the Rappahannock River near Fredericksburg, Virginia. Around this same time, the family sent George's two half-brothers, Lawrence and Augustine Jr., whom everyone called Austin, to England for their formal education. Lawrence, the oldest, was 14 years older than George, and Austin was 12 years older. While there are very few facts verifying George's educational path, there is good evidence that he started his education by studying with a servant tutor whom his father brought from England. The tutor instructed him in the principles of grammar the theory of reasoning, the essentials of history, the art of speaking, the science of numbers, the elements of geography, the highest branches of mathematics, and in graceful accomplishments of riding, fencing, dancing, and performing the military exercises. It is also probable that George attended a small elementary school near Fredericksburg. One can imagine him on the playground with his schoolmates mimicking the lessons they had just learned. Riding horses swiftly through the countryside. Fencing with a rival over the love of a beautiful young lady. Dancing with the young lady after winning her hand in combat. And marching off to combat against an evil and corrupt enemy. In 1739, Lawrence Washington returned from his studies in England. Despite the gap in their ages, the brothers shared a close bond. George admired Lawrence as a role model, while Lawrence, in turn, felt a strong sense of duty to protect his younger half-brother. Soon after his return, Lawrence's adventurous spirit led him to accept a captain's commission in the British Army, setting sail for the West Indies to engage in conflict with Spain. During his time away, Lawrence wrote frequently, though not all of his letters reached their destination. Those that did often took around 4 months to arrive at the Washington household. Whenever a letter finally made it home, George eagerly scanned its contents, hoping for vivid and dramatic portrayals of military life. In reality, Lawrence and his fellow soldiers spent more time fighting diseases and hunger than engaging the enemy. But he did his best to paint a picture of war that conveyed reality, yet satisfied George's imaginative curiosity. In one such letter, Lawrence wrote,
I am resolved to persevere in the undertaking. War is horrid in fact, but much more so in imagination. We there learn to live on ordinary diet, to watch much, and disregard the noise or shot of cannon.
Near the end of 1742 or beginning of 1743, Lawrence returned to his family in Virginia, and the admiration from George continued to grow. In April 1743, when George was 11 years old, their father, Augustine, died after a short illness. In his will, he left the estate near Fredericksburg to George and an estate on the Potomac north of Westmoreland to Lawrence. Lawrence moved into his new estate and named it Mount Vernon after his former commander in the West Indies. In July of that same year, Lawrence married Anne Fairfax from the neighboring Belvoir estate. Over the next couple of years, George began to spend the majority of his time at Mount Vernon, and this would take him into his next phase of life and learning. Thank you for watching this episode of The Adventures of George Washington. Each week we will bring you a new video that chronicles key events in the life of America's greatest military and political leader. If you found the content useful or entertaining, please subscribe. We look forward to being with you again in the next episode. I have been your host, Professor Worthington.